Snow swirled through the darkening Colorado sky as Sam Crane led his mule through knee-deep drifts. The winter of 1878 had come down on the highlands like a hammer, and this storm, it had teeth. His breath exploded in white puffs, each one a small ghost in the biting air as he searched the sparse woodland for fallen branches. The light was dying fast, and his cabin was a cold, empty box waiting for a fire to give it a heartbeat through another bitter night. The mule's hooves were a dull crunch in the crusty snow as they picked their way between the towering, silent pines. Sam's face, weathered as an old rock, was half lost in a snow-dusted beard. His eyes, though, they were sharp, scanning the ground for anything that might burn. The leather of his coat, stiff with cold, groaned with every move he made. Then a sound caught his ear. It was faint and wrong, a sliver of sound against the deep howl of the wind. He stopped dead, head cocked, listening. There it was again. A weak cry, so thin the storm almost swallowed it whole. Sam hesitated. He wasn't a man who went chasing strange noises in a blizzard, but something in that sound. It wasn't an animal. It was human, and it was desperate. He turned, tugging the reluctant mule through the deepening snow, moving toward the sound. The cry led him toward the abandoned Morningstar mine. Its buildings, bleached and broken by the weather, stood like dark ghosts against the endless white. Most folks had cleared out months ago when the silver vein ran dry, leaving the whole camp to rot. The sound was clearer now, a fragile whimper coming from one of the smaller, leaning shacks. Sam approached with caution, his boots crunching loud in the frozen silence. Through a warped board, he saw a flicker of movement. "Hello," he called out, his voice a low growl. "Someone in there!" A weak whimper was his only answer. Sam put his shoulder to the door, forcing it inward against the drifted snow. What he found inside made even his hardened heart catch in his throat. A young woman lay huddled in the corner, wrapped in rags that were barely rags at all. Her skin was the color of milk, her hair so light it was almost white. When her eyes met his, they were the pale, flat color of a winter sky. An albino. She looked half-starved, her face a gaunt mask of hunger and cold. "Please," she whispered, her teeth chattering so hard the sound was like stones clicking together. "Please, help me." Sam stood in the doorway, snow dusting his broad shoulders as he took in the scene. He knew who she was, Nicole May, daughter of Jake and Sarah, who'd been crushed in that cave-in 3 months back. After they died, the townsfolk, spooked and looking for someone to blame, had turned her out. They said she was cursed, that her strange, pale appearance had brought the bad luck that killed her parents and dried up the mine. Without a word, Sam shrugged off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her trembling form. She felt as light as a child when he lifted her in his arms. Her head lolled against his chest as he carried her out to the waiting mule. "Hold on now," he muttered, settling her carefully across the mule's back. "Cabin's not far." The wind cut sharper as they made their slow way through the gathering dark. Nicole clung weakly to the mule's rough coat, her breathing shallow and fast. Every few steps, Sam reached up to steady her when she swayed, his rough hand a firm anchor in the storm. "Please," she whispered once, her voice so faint it was barely there. "Please don't leave me to die." Sam's jaw tightened beneath his beard. "Ain't gonna let you die, girl." The sight of his cabin through the swirling snow was a relief so sharp it was almost pain. Lamplight glowed behind the frost-rimed windows, a promise of warmth in the frozen world. He helped Nicole down from the mule, his arms supporting her trembling body. He led her to the door, but he paused there, his hand on the cold iron latch. What he was about to say went against every solitary instinct he'd spent years building. But looking at Nicole's desperate, pale face, he knew he couldn't turn her away, and he knew he couldn't just offer her charity. "Listen here," he said, his voice gruff. "I need blonde sons, and you need shelter." He watched her face, watched the words sink in. "Ain't a proper marriage," he added, the words tasting like rust in his mouth. "But it's better than freezing to death." Nicole's pale eyes widened. For a long, silent moment, she just stared up at him, snow collecting in her colorless hair. The only sound was the wind screaming through the pines. Then slowly she nodded. Sam pushed open the door and ushered her into the warmth. The fire had burned low while he was out, but the embers still glowed, and the heat that radiated from the stone hearth was enough to chase away the worst of the chill. He settled Nicole into his old wooden rocker, tucking a warm blanket around her shoulders. With practiced efficiency, he stoked the fire back to life, then set about warming a pot of beans and making coffee. Nicole watched him through half-closed eyes, her thin hands clutching the blanket like a lifeline. The wind howled outside, rattling the window panes, but inside the cabin, it was quiet. The only sound was the pop and crackle of the fire. Sam filled a tin cup with hot black coffee and pressed it into her trembling hands. "Drink," he ordered. "Get some warm in you." She sipped it carefully. A little bit of color returned to her blue-tinged lips. Sam spooned beans onto a plate and set it in her lap. "Eat what you can," he said, "but go slow. Been a while since you had proper food, I reckon." She nodded, taking small, careful bites. Tears started to slide down her thin cheeks as she ate. He couldn't tell if they were from gratitude or grief. He went outside, busying himself with settling the mule in the lean-to and bringing in more firewood, giving her a moment to herself. When he came back in, stamping snow from his boots, she had finished most of the beans. She looked up at him with those strange pale eyes. He saw fear in them, but something else too, determination. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft, "for saving my life." Sam just grunted, uncomfortable with thanks. "Ain't right, leaving a person to freeze." He hung his snow-covered coat by the door. "Got a spare room in back. It ain't much, but it's warm." Nicole's fingers twisted in the blanket. "Your offer? About sons." Her voice trailed off, uncertain. "Ain't expecting nothing tonight," Sam said gruffly. "You need rest. Proper feeding first. We can talk more tomorrow." Relief softened her features. She nodded, and some of the tension seemed to melt out of her thin shoulders. He showed her to the small back room. It was dusty, but the narrow bed was still made up with clean linens. "Sleep as long as you need," he told her. "Ain't going nowhere in this storm anyhow." Nicole sank onto the bed, still wrapped in the blanket. "Thank you, Mr. Crane," she whispered. "Sam," he corrected. "Just Sam." He paused in the doorway. "Get some rest." He closed the door softly and returned to his chair by the fire. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside his cabin, something had changed. The lonely silence that had been his only companion for years was gone, broken by the quiet breathing of another soul. Sam stared into the flames, thinking about the strange turn his day had taken. He'd gone out for firewood and come back with a wife. Or something like it. It wasn't proper, what he'd proposed, but proper didn't count for much when you were staring death in the face. He thought about Nicole's pale face, the courage it must have taken to trust a stranger when her whole world had turned its back on her. Maybe that kind of trust was worth more than proper. The fire crackled, a soft, steady sound in the quiet cabin. For tonight at least, they were both safe from the storm. Nicole sat close to the hearth, warming her hands around a bowl of steaming stew. The rich smell of beef and potatoes filled the small cabin, making her stomach rumble. She couldn't remember the last time she'd smelled a proper meal, let alone eaten one. Sam had served her a generous portion from a pot that hung at the back of the fireplace, his movements efficient and silent. Now he sat in his chair across from her, his big hands busy mending a piece of leather harness. The only sounds were the howl of the wind outside, the crackle of the fire, and the soft creak of leather as Sam worked. She watched him from under her lashes, studying the broad set of his shoulders, the way his rough fingers moved with a surprising gentleness over the worn tack. The storm rattled the window panes and Nicole jumped, her spoon clattering against the bowl. Sam glanced up, his expression unreadable, then returned to his mending. "Storm's bad," he said, his voice a low gravel, "but the cabin's solid. Built it myself." Nicole nodded, taking another careful spoonful of stew. The warmth spread through her, a welcome feeling after so many days of bone-deep cold. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the spoon down. "Mr. Crane." "Sam," she corrected herself, gathering her courage. Did you truly mean what you said? About needing sons?" Sam's hand stilled on the leather. He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his words were measured, careful. Ain't offering out of pity, if that's what you're asking. He set the harness aside, his gaze meeting hers directly. Been alone too long. This land needs more hands to work it proper. Needs a family to make it worth the keeping. He paused, studying her face. You'll be safe here, whether you decide to stay or not. But I meant what I said. Nicole's fingers twisted in her skirt. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. Outside, the wind moaned through the pines like a lost soul. She closed her eyes for a moment. A quiet certainty settled in her heart. She believed God had led her here, to this cabin, to this gruff, silent mountain man and his strange, desperate offer. There was a purpose in it, even if she couldn't see it yet. The night passed slowly. Sam gave her his bed, taking the chair by the fire for himself. Nicole lay awake for hours, listening as the storm slowly died down to a whisper, watching the moonlight creep across the rough-hewn walls. Dawn broke clear and cold. The storm had spent itself. Sam was already up when Nicole emerged from the bedroom, a pot of coffee bubbling on the stove. He nodded toward a cup he'd set out for her. Thought I'd show you around. Now the weather's cleared, he said as she sipped the strong brew. Need to know what you're getting into, if you're to stay. She followed him outside, wrapping a shawl he'd found for her around her thin shoulders. The world was transformed, buried under a thick blanket of fresh snow that sparkled in the morning sun. Her breath frosted in the air as Sam led her to a small stone building. Spring house, he explained, pushing open the heavy door. Never runs dry. Good cold storage. Inside it was cool and dim, with shelves holding crocks of preserved food and a channel of clear water running through the center. From there they walked to the lean-to barn where 2 horses and a milk cow dozed in their stalls. Everything was simple, but solid and well-maintained. Nicole stood in the yard, taking it all in. Smoke curled from the cabin's chimney against a brilliant blue sky. The small homestead wasn't much, but it was real. It represented something she'd never dared to hope for again. A chance at a life. Just then, the sound of approaching horses made her turn. A group of riders was passing on the trail that ran by Sam's property. Nicole recognized them, the general store owner and his wife, the blacksmith's son. They reined in their horses when they spotted her, staring openly at her pale form standing in Sam's dooryard. Sam stepped up beside her, his presence large and solid, a silent wall. The riders moved on without a word, but Nicole saw the looks they exchanged. By nightfall, she knew, word would be all over the settlement. The giant widower had taken in the ghost girl. The rest of the day passed in a quiet blur. Sam showed her how to work the temperamental stove, which floorboards creaked, where he kept the flour and sugar. He didn't talk much, but his instructions were clear and patient. As they sat down to supper, she finally voiced the worry that had been growing all day. What will people think about me being here? Sam looked up from his plate, his face unreadable in the lamplight. They've thought worse of me before, he said flatly. The words carried a weight, hinting at stories she didn't know. But there was a strange comfort in them, too. Sam Crane clearly didn't care what anyone thought. Still, as she helped him clear the dishes, a mixture of relief and dread settled in her stomach. Relief at having found this place, this chance, and dread at the whispers that were already spreading through the settlement. Sam seemed to sense her unease. As she dried the last plate, he spoke without looking at her. Ain't got to decide nothing tonight. Take your time. Think it through proper. She nodded, grateful for his patience. The cabin was warm, the wind outside no longer a threat. Whatever came next, she knew she'd made the right choice in staying, at least for now. As she banked the fire for the night, she thought, maybe this was where she was meant to be all along. In this quiet cabin with its silent guardian, learning to build something new from the ashes of her old life. Morning light streamed through the frost-edged windows as Sam pulled on his heavy coat. Nicole stood by the stove, stirring a pot of porridge. The routine, after only a few days, already felt strangely comfortable. Need supplies from town? Sam said, adjusting his collar. Won't be back till near dark. He paused, glancing at her. You'll be all right here? Nicole nodded, trying to hide the slight tremble in her hands at the thought of being left alone. Yes, I'll manage. The cabin needs a good cleaning anyway. Sam grunted. Nobody comes up this way much, he assured her. Door's solid. Bolt it behind me. She watched him saddle his horse in the crisp morning air. The snow glittered like diamonds. He mounted with practiced ease, gathering the reins. Thank you, Nicole said softly, for everything. He just touched the brim of his hat and turned his horse toward town. She stood in the doorway until he was out of sight, then slid the heavy bolt into place. Alone, Nicole took stock of the cabin. Dust lay thick on the shelves. Cobwebs draped the corners. The floor needed sweeping. The windows were clouded with grime. She found a broom and set to work, humming softly. The simple task felt good, purposeful. By midday, the main room was transformed. Sunlight streamed through clean windows, catching on the polished surface of an old rocking chair. She paused to rest, settling into the rocker with a cup of tea. The quiet didn't feel so threatening now. The cabin's sturdy walls held warmth, possibility. She let her mind wander, imagining curtains at the windows, maybe some dried flowers on the mantel. Small touches to make this place feel like a home. She caught herself, her heart clenching. Was she a fool to even think it? This arrangement with Sam. It wasn't real, just convenience, desperation. The sun was settling toward the mountains when she heard hoofbeats. Her heart jumped, but she recognized Sam's broad figure through the window. She unbolted the door as he dismounted, his arms full of supplies. Flour, sugar, coffee. But it was the folded paper he held out to her that caught her attention. The seal of the railroad company was clearly visible in the red wax. Came while I was in town, he said, his voice grim. Better sit down. Nicole sank into the rocker, her fingers trembling as she took the letter. Sam stood by the fire, his expression like stone. Notice is hereby given to Samuel Crane, he began to read aloud, regarding Parcel 23, Shadow Creek Township. Recent survey has determined said location optimal for planned railway depot and stockyards. Unless proof of an established family farmstead can be provided by the spring thaw, the land will be seized under the right-of-way statute. Sam's voice trailed off. Nicole sat very still, the words washing over her like ice water. His proposal. It hadn't just been kindness. It hadn't even been just loneliness. It had been necessity. How long? She asked, her voice quiet. How long have you known? Got the first notice 3 months back. He moved to stoke the fire, not meeting her eyes. Thought I could fight it, but they're set on having this land. The spring, the level ground. It's perfect for their depot. Nicole looked down at her pale hands. And a single man's claim isn't as strong as a family farmstead. No, Sam said, finally turning to face her. It ain't. The cabin grew dark as the sun set. She lit the lamp while he put away the supplies, each of them lost in their own thoughts. When she began to prepare supper, a simple meal of beans and cornbread, Sam spoke again. Need to be clear about what this means. He sat heavily in his chair. We'd have to present ourselves as man and wife. In town, at church, everywhere. No half measures. They'll be watching, looking for any reason to void the claim. Nicole stirred the beans, fighting back a wave of frustration and something else she couldn't name. So I'm just a convenience, a way to save your land. Ain't like that, Sam's voice was rough. I meant what I said about wanting a family, about making this place worth keeping. He looked at her then, his eyes dark with a truth he couldn't hide. But yes, without this arrangement, I lose everything I've built here. And I go back to being the cursed ghost girl nobody wants, Nicole finished, the words bitter on her tongue. I understand, Mr. Crane. Our fates are tied now, aren't they? They ate in silence, the weight of the truth hanging between them. After the dishes were done, Nicole prepared for bed. Through the bedroom door, she could see Sam still sitting by the fire, his head bowed. Then, to her surprise, he slowly lowered himself to his knees. His voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. Lord, it's been a long time. Years, I reckon. Don't know if you're listening anymore. Don't know if I deserve it. But that girl in there, she needs your help. We both do. Nicole lay very still, listening to his halting prayer. Each word seemed dragged from deep inside him, rough with disuse, but sincere. Her own silent prayer rose to join his, for guidance, for strength, for some sign that this strange, desperate path was the right one. 2 days passed, the hours ticking by with an uneasy rhythm. The morning of the third day dawned crisp and clear, frost painting delicate ferns on the cabin windows. Nicole stood before a clouded mirror, trying to make herself presentable for church. Her faded dress hung loose on her thin frame, but it was clean. Sam waited by the door, dressed in his best shirt. His usual silence seemed heavier today, weighted with the knowledge of what they faced. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, wrapping her threadbare shawl tighter. The wool was thin, offering little protection against the morning's bite. Sam noticed her shiver, but said nothing, just held the door as she stepped out into the pale sunlight. They walked down the main street of Shadow Creek together. Sam's broad frame naturally positioned itself between her and the curious stares from shop windows. His presence was a shield. She kept her eyes forward, but she could hear the whispers rising in their wake. "That's her, the cursed one. Poor Thomas May's girl. What's Sam Crane thinking, taking in the likes of her?" The words were like tiny, sharp stones. The church stood at the end of the street, its white paint gleaming. Nicole hesitated on the steps, memories flooding back. Her mother's hand in hers, her father's deep voice joining the hymns. Sam's hand touched her elbow, a brief, steadying pressure. Inside, the congregation turned almost as one. Conversations died. Nicole felt the weight of every stare as they made their way to an empty pew near the back. Her pale skin seemed to glow in the shadows, marking her as different. Other. Reverend Matthews stood at the pulpit, his face tightening at the sight of them. He had once courted her mother years ago, before she chose Thomas May. That old pain still lingered in his eyes when he looked at Nicole, mixed now with something darker. Fear, maybe, or suspicion. The service began. The familiar hymns and prayers were a comfort. But halfway through his sermon, Reverend Matthews paused, his knuckles white on the edge of the pulpit. "Brothers and sisters," he intoned, his voice carrying to every corner of the church. "We must be vigilant. The Lord sends us signs, omens in our midst, warning us of evil's presence." Nicole's chest tightened. She felt Sam shift beside her, his shoulder a solid wall against hers. "Those marked as different," the Reverend continued, his gaze fixing on Nicole. "Those who survive when others perish. We must question why. Is it truly God's mercy, or something more sinister?" Murmurs rippled through the pews. Women clutched their children closer. The shame burned through her like a fever. She gripped her shawl until her knuckles were as white as her skin. Sam's low growl was barely audible. "Enough!" The word carried no further than their pew, but she felt its vibration through his whole body. They endured the rest of the service in rigid silence. When the final hymn faded, Sam guided her out before anyone could approach them. But instead of heading for the wagon, he turned toward the mercantile. Nicole looked up at him, questioning. "Need supplies," he said shortly, "and you need proper clothes." The bell above the door chimed as they entered. Mr. Peterson, the shopkeeper, straightened behind his counter, his expression wary. "What can I get you, Sam?" "Cloth," Sam said, moving to the fabric bolts. "Something sturdy, suitable for a dress." Nicole touched the nearest bolt, a simple brown cotton. "Mr. Crane, you don't have to." "Won't have you mocked in rags," he cut her off, his voice gruff, but with an undercurrent of something else. Gentleness. "Choose what you need." With trembling fingers, she selected enough fabric for a basic dress. Sam added buttons and thread to their order, paying without complaint, though she saw him wince at the total. The cost of dignity was not small. The ride home was quiet. "I'm sorry," Nicole whispered finally, clutching the package of fabric. "I fear I'll ruin you. Your reputation." Sam's laugh was a harsh, short sound. "Reputation? Been the town monster since Sarah died. Takes more than gossip to ruin me." The sun was setting by the time they reached the cabin. Inside, Nicole spread the new fabric on the table, running her fingers over its sturdy weave. She found a needle and thread and settled into a chair by the lamp to begin her work. The soft scratch of the needle through the cloth mingled with the rhythmic scrape of Sam's whetstone as he sharpened his tools. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with the sounds of shared work, of two people building something in the face of the world. She glanced up from her sewing to find him watching her, his expression unreadable in the shadowed light. He nodded once, a small, sharp movement, then returned to his work. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and steady, blanketing their small homestead in a fresh layer of white. For the first time since that terrible night in the storm, Nicole felt something like peace settle in her chest. This wasn't the life she'd imagined, but here, in this moment, with the lamp burning low and Sam's solid presence across the room, she could almost believe it might become something real. The days settled into a quiet rhythm. Each sunrise brought new tasks for Nicole to master. She woke before dawn, determined to prove her worth. The mule, a stubborn creature named Pete, was her first challenge. "He ain't fond of strangers," Sam warned her. "Took me near a month to earn his trust." Nicole moved slowly, speaking in soft tones. "Easy there, Pete. I've got your breakfast." The mule's ears flicked. He stood still as she poured the feed, then nickered softly when she dared to pat his neck. From the barn door, Sam's eyebrows rose. "Well now, reckon you've got away with him." A small victory, but each one mattered. She learned to cook on the old stove, her first biscuits coming out like rocks. Sam ate them without a word of complaint. She learned how he liked his coffee, how to stack firewood so it would dry properly, how to mend worn leather with a steady stitch. "You've got patient hands," he told her one afternoon, as they worked side by side on a broken harness. The quiet praise warmed her more than the fire. One evening she lifted a heavy kettle from the fire, and scalding water splashed across her hand. She bit back a cry, but he heard her sharp intake of breath. He was beside her in 2 strides, his gruff voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "Let me see." His calloused fingers were surprisingly tender as he examined the angry red skin. "Sarah taught me about burns," he said quietly, carefully wrapping her hand with a clean cloth and a salve. She was always patching up strays. The mention of his lost wife hung in the air, a sad, gentle ghost. "She sounds kind." "She was," he said, his hand stilling for a moment. "Too kind for this hard country, maybe." A week later, a visitor arrived. A Ute woman named Annaba, wrapped in a wool blanket. Sam greeted her with respect. "Annaba trades good medicine," he explained to Nicole. "Knows more about healing than any doctor in town." The Ute woman's dark eyes studied Nicole with a quiet intensity. "You are the pale one they speak of," she said in careful English. "The one they fear without reason." Nicole nodded, warming to Annaba's direct manner. They sat by the fire while Sam measured out flour for trade. Annaba opened her medicine bundle, showing Nicole different herbs, explaining their uses. "This stops bleeding," she said, holding up dried yarrow. "This one makes sleep come when pain is strong." Nicole leaned forward, fascinated. "Could you teach me?" Annaba's face softened. "You wish to learn our ways." "I wish to be useful," Nicole admitted. The older woman nodded slowly. "Then I will teach you. Knowledge should flow like water between people, not be dammed up by fear." They talked until sunset. When Annaba left, she pressed a small packet of herbs into Nicole's hand. "For your burn," she said. That night, Nicole and Sam sat by the fire. "I want to learn everything she can teach me," Nicole said softly. "All my life, people have seen me as cursed, useless. But maybe God had a purpose in making you different," Sam finished, surprising her. He stared into the fire, his profile carved in light and shadow. "When Sarah died," he continued slowly, "I felt like God had abandoned me. Couldn't see any purpose in it. Turned my back on everything. Figured I'd live alone, die alone. Then this storm, it blows you to my door." The fire popped and settled. "I'm scared," Sam admitted, his voice rough. "Scared of losing everything again. The land, this, hope, whatever this is becoming." He gestured vaguely between them. "It's easier being alone. Safer." Nicole's heart ached at the pain in his words. "I'm scared too," she whispered. "Scared I'll fail you. that I won't be strong enough to help save this place. Their honesty hung in the air, as real as the smoke from the fire. Then Sam reached over and touched her bandaged hand, just for a moment. You're stronger than you know, he said. I see it every day. The cabin felt different now, warmed by more than just the flames. It was warmed by growing trust, by secrets shared, by the first tender shoots of understanding, taking root between two wounded souls. The morning sun painted golden squares on the cabin floor as Nicole straightened the rough-hewn benches. Her hands trembled slightly as she arranged the slate and chalk Sam had brought from town. The thought of children filling this space with their voices made her heart flutter with both excitement and fear. You sure about this? Sam asked from the doorway. He'd been hesitant when she first suggested it, worried about the town's reaction. Children need learning, Nicole replied softly, and I need to show I can be useful. She didn't add what they both knew, that proving herself a contributing member of the household might help their case with the railroad. The first wagon arrived shortly after. A mother helped 3 small children down. The woman's face was pinched with uncertainty. Mrs. Tanner, Nicole greeted her, thank you for bringing them. The woman nodded stiffly. Pastor says it ain't right, but John Peters's boys been coming home speaking their letters proper since you started teaching them on the sly. She studied Nicole's pale features. Long as there's no strange business. Just reading and numbers, Nicole assured her, and perhaps some Bible verses, if you approve. More wagons arrived, bringing a total of 8 children. They hung back at first, stealing glances at her white hair and pink eyes. But a child's curiosity is a powerful thing. Miss May, a small girl whispered, tugging on her skirt. Is it true your hair glows in the dark? Nicole knelt down, smiling. No, sweet one. It just looks extra bright in the sunlight. Shall we learn about letters that can glow with stories? The morning passed in a blur of chalk, dust, and eager voices. Sam's heavy footsteps crossed the porch several times as he went about his chores, but he never interrupted. Once she caught him watching through the window, an unreadable expression on his weathered face. When the parents returned, Nicole's heart swelled as the little ones proudly showed off their learning. Mama, look! Young Tommy Peters exclaimed, carefully printing his name in a sand tray. Miss May showed me how. Mrs. Tanner examined her daughter's slate. Well, she said slowly, I reckon some learning won't hurt. Her eyes met Nicole's, softening slightly. Maybe they can come again next week. Word spread. By late afternoon, 3 more families had ridden out to inquire about lessons. Nicole's cheeks ached from smiling, but it was a good ache. As the sun began to set, she tidied away the day's materials, humming softly. The cabin felt different, as if the children's presence had chased away old shadows. Sam came in from the barn, stamping snow from his boots. Quite a day, he observed. They're such bright children, Nicole said, her voice full of enthusiasm. She stopped, suddenly self-conscious. I'm sorry, you probably don't want to hear about all this. Sam's face held something close to pride. I like seeing you with purpose, he said quietly. It suits you. Pleasure warmed her as she prepared supper. The familiar routine settled her thoughts. When she placed the steaming bowls on the table, Sam took a deep breath. Best meal I've had in years, he declared, reaching for the cornbread. You've got away in the kitchen now. It's simple fare, she said, though his praise made her heart leap. Simple's good, he replied. Honest food, honest work. That's what makes a real home. The word home hung in the air. Nicole realized with a jolt that she did feel at home here. This cabin, with its worn floors and smoky hearth, had become more than just shelter. It was where she belonged. Their quiet meal was interrupted by hoofbeats. Sam rose, his hand moving automatically to the rifle above the door. But it was only the evening mail carrier. Nicole watched as Sam read the letter, saw his shoulders stiffen. Railroad? She asked softly. He nodded, dropping the paper onto the table. Inspectors, they're coming. 2 weeks, maybe 3. His voice was flat. They need to see a proper family establishment, they say. Her hands twisted in her apron. Everything they'd built, her teaching, their growing comfort, the gradual acceptance from the town. It all felt as fragile as frost. We'll be ready, she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Sam's weathered face was troubled. Ain't right, making you pretend. I'm not pretending, Nicole interrupted, surprising them both with her firmness. This is my home now. These children are my purpose. And you gave me a chance when no one else would. Let me help you save your land. Their eyes met across the table. Something shifted in Sam's expression. Respect, maybe. Our land, he said finally. If we're doing this, it's our land now. Nicole nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. Whatever the railroad inspector might bring, she was no longer the frightened girl Sam had found in the snow. She was a teacher, a homemaker, a woman with purpose, and she would fight for the life they were building. One lesson, one meal, one day at a time. The March morning dawned bright and clear, winter's grip finally loosening. Patches of bare earth showed through the melting snow, and the air carried the first hint of spring. Nicole wrapped her shawl tightly as she watched Anaba approach the cabin. The earth wakes, Anaba said by way of greeting. Good time for gathering medicine. Nicole nodded eagerly. Sam was already out with the mules hauling timber and had given his gruff approval for her to learn what he called women's wisdom. Anaba led the way along the southern slopes where the snow melted first. Here, she said, kneeling beside a cluster of small green shoots. Early spring medicine. Good for a chest sickness. Nicole knelt beside her, watching intently, her pale hands mimicking the older woman's careful, reverent movements. The land gives what we need, Anaba explained. We must give thanks. Take only what is needed. They worked their way along the hillside, Anaba teaching her to identify the plants, their uses, their stories. When they returned to the cabin, the air filled with the sharp, green scent of healing plants as Anaba showed her how to dry some herbs and brew others into teas. Remember, Anaba said, watching Nicole strain a dark liquid into bottles, the medicine is not just in the plants, it is in the caring hands, the good heart. You have both. From outside came the familiar sound of Sam's mule team. He is a good man, Anaba said quietly, following Nicole's gaze. Strong like the mountain, but gentle like the spring snow. Nicole felt her cheeks warm. He saved my life. And you save his home, Anaba replied. An equal trade, a good balance. Before Nicole could respond, a wagon rattled into the yard. It was the Coopers from town, their young son Willie bundled against his mother's chest. Miss May, Mrs. Cooper called out, her voice tight with worry. Someone said you might know about healing herbs. Nicole exchanged a look with Anaba, who nodded encouragingly. Willie's cough was harsh and wet, his small face flushed with fever. I can make a tea, Nicole offered, her voice steady despite her racing heart, and a poultice for his chest, if you'll allow it. Mrs. Cooper hesitated, then nodded. Inside, Nicole worked under Anaba's watchful eye, her hands moving surely. Within an hour, Willie's breathing had eased. His cough loosened. Mrs. Cooper's anxious face softened as she watched her son finally drift into a peaceful sleep. I don't know how to thank you, she said, looking at Nicole with new eyes. No thanks needed, Nicole replied. Just tell anyone else who needs help that they're welcome here. As the Cooper's wagon disappeared, more neighbors arrived. Word had spread quickly. The afternoon stretched into evening as Nicole tended to a sprained wrist, a teething baby, and elders' aching joints. Sam quietly brought in extra chairs, built up the fire, and kept coffee brewing. His presence was a steady, silent support. The sun was setting when the last neighbor left. Nicole sat at the kitchen table, tired but content. You did good today, Sam said, setting a bowl of stew before her. Saw how they looked at you. Different. After you helped their young ones. The next morning, they rode into town for supplies. They had just finished loading their wagon when the preacher's voice cut through the air. Sam Crane! He strode toward them, his face dark with purpose. I warned you about harboring that curse. Sam's hand tightened on the wagon reins. Speak plain, preacher, or don't speak at all. That albino witch will bring doom on us all. The preacher's voice carried across the street, drawing onlookers. The railroad inspector won't just take your land. He'll condemn the whole depot project. Is that what you want? To destroy everyone's hopes for progress? Sam's body tensed like a mountain cat about to spring. Nicole saw his free hand curl into a fist, saw the rage building in his face. Without thinking, she reached out and laid her palm gently on his arm. The touch seemed to ground him. His voice, when it came, was low and dangerous. That curse you're speaking of saved Willie Cooper's life yesterday. Helped Martha Jensen's baby sleep. Eased old man Walker's joints. His eyes burned into the preacher's. What healing have you done lately, besides spreading poison? The preacher stepped back, but his face remained hard. Mark my words, Crane. No good will come of this ungodly arrangement. He turned and stalked away, leaving whispers in his wake. The ride home was tense and quiet. As they crested the last hill before the cabin, Sam spoke. I won't let them take this place. His voice was rough with emotion. Won't let them drive us out with their fear and foolishness. The cabin came into view, smoke rising straight and true from the chimney. The sight of it settled something in Nicole's chest. This was home now. Sam drew the wagon to a stop in the yard. Before he could climb down, Nicole spoke softly. Thank you for defending me. He turned to look at her then, his weathered face softening. Ain't nothing to thank me for, he said. We defend our own. The words hung in the air between them, simple but as solid as the mountains themselves. Nicole nodded, understanding at last. He would fight for the land and for the family they were building upon it. The March thaw came suddenly, turning the mountainside into a patchwork of melting snow and mud. Icicles dripped from the cabin's eaves with a peaceful rhythm. Sam stood in the yard, squinting up at the roof where winter's heavy snows had loosened several shingles. Needs mending before the spring rains hit, he called down to Nicole, who stood holding his tool bag. I can help, she offered. He hesitated, studying her slight frame, but then he nodded. Reckon 4 hands will work faster than 2. He helped her up the ladder, his broad palm steadying her back. They fell into an easy rhythm, Sam prying up damaged shingles while Nicole handed him replacements and nails. My pa used to say a roof's like a promise, Sam found himself saying. Got to tend it regular, or everything underneath suffers. Is that why you've stayed up here alone so long? Nicole asked. Tending promises? Before he could answer, a clatter from below drew their attention. A young goat was investigating Nicole's laundry basket. It toppled, sending clean clothes sprawling into the mud. Oh, for land's sakes, Nicole muttered. And then something extraordinary happened. Sam laughed. It was a rusty sound, long unused, but genuine. Nicole stared at him in surprise before her own laughter joined his, ringing clear across the yard. The sound of it stopped them both short. He couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed like that, free and unguarded. The rest of the morning passed in comfortable companionship. You're good at this, he said as they stacked fallen branches. Learning the ways of things? Nicole's smile was shy, but pleased. I like understanding how things work, how to make them better. She hesitated, like you did with me, that night in the storm. Sam's hand stilled on the wood. He remembered her then, half frozen and desperate. You did that yourself, he said gruffly. I just opened a door. The days that followed settled into a peaceful routine. Their evenings grew longer, filled with quiet conversation. One night Sam surprised them both by reaching for her hand before saying grace. Thank you, Lord, he said, his voice rough with an emotion he couldn't name. For this food, this home, and for second chances. He squeezed her hand gently. When he opened his eyes, he found her watching him with a warmth that made his chest tight. The peaceful moment shattered the next afternoon. Sam returned from checking fence lines to find Nicole's laundry on the line, but no sign of her. He found her in the cabin, huddled by the fire despite the mild day, her skin an angry red. Angry blisters covered her exposed arms and face, where the spring sun had struck her pale flesh. I'm fine, she tried to say, but her voice shook. Sam pressed a hand to her forehead and cursed softly. She was burning up. Should have warned you better, he muttered, helping her to her bed. Your skin. It can't take the sun like others can. Fear gripped Sam's heart. He'd seen fever take strong men, and Nicole, for all her spirit, was so fragile. Just like Sarah had been. The memory of his wife's final hours slammed into him. Her pale face, the midwife's grim expression, the terrible stillness that followed. He'd sworn then never to let anyone close enough to hurt him like that again. But here he was, watching another woman fight for her life under his roof. "Stay with me," he said hoarsely, tucking blankets around her. "I'll fetch Annaba. She'll know what to do." As the sun set, her condition worsened. She tossed restlessly, calling out to people only she could see. Sam sat beside her, as helpless as he'd been with Sarah. The familiar pain rose up to choke him. But this time, something else rose with it. Words he hadn't spoken in years. "Lord," he whispered, taking her hot hand between both of his. "I know I ain't been much for talking to you since Sarah, but Nicole, she still believes. She makes me want to believe again, too." His voice cracked. "Please, don't take her. Not when we're just learning what a family might mean. Not when she's brought so much light back into this old cabin." He stopped, the admission costing him everything. I I need her." It was the truth. Sometime in these past weeks, she had become more than a solution to his problem. She had become essential, like water or air. Through the night, he kept his vigil. He bathed her face, spooned water between her cracked lips, and prayed. Every labored breath she took was an echo of Sarah's last moments. But he forced himself to stay present, to focus on Nicole's living face. "You're stronger than you look," he told her, unconscious form. "Prove that the day we met. Prove it again now. Fight this." As if in answer, her fingers tightened slightly in his grasp. Sam held on, anchoring her to life with his touch and his whispered prayers, waiting for dawn and whatever it might bring. Nicole's fever burned like a wildfire for 3 days. The cabin, usually filled with the quiet sounds of their shared life, now echoed with her delirious murmurs and Sam's worried footsteps. He kept vigil without rest, his large hands more used to an axe, growing steady at lifting her head to take tiny sips of water. "Stay with me," he would whisper. The words became his prayer. Annaba arrived the first evening, her medicine pouch clutched tight. "Watch closely," she instructed Sam, crushing dried willow bark into a pot. "This tea brings down the fever." He learned eagerly, his desperation washing away his usual stubborn independence. Annaba placed a gnarled hand on Nicole's forehead. "She burns bright, but her spirit is strong, like a young tree that bends in the storm but does not break." Together they worked through the night. She showed him how to make poultices for Nicole's blistered skin. "These marks from the sun?" she asked gently. Sam nodded, guilt heavy in his voice. "I should have known better. Should have protected her." Annaba's dark eyes held a deep wisdom. "You can't protect from everything. You can only help heal after the hurt comes." Word of Nicole's illness spread like brush fire. Neighbors rode past, their whispers carried on the spring wind. "The curse is finally showing itself," one woman said, crossing herself. The preacher rode out on the second day. He found Sam chopping wood, the rhythmic thud of the axe matching the pounding in his head from lack of sleep. "Brother Crane," the preacher called, staying on his horse, "word is your house guest lies near death." Sam buried the axe in the chopping block. "Nicole's sick, not dying, and she's more than a house guest." The preacher's lips thinned. "Consider this God's mercy, Sam. If she passes, you can still save your claim. Find a proper wife. Have real sons." Sam's hand tightened on the axe handle. "Choose your next words carefully, preacher." "The railroad inspector won't look kindly on a dead woman in your home," the preacher pressed on, "especially one marked as she is. You'll lose everything." "Get off my land," Sam's voice was deadly quiet. "Now." The preacher wheeled his horse around. "Pride goes before destruction, Brother Crane. Don't let that ghost girl drag you down with her." Later that day, Earl from the Mercantile rode out with supplies. "Maybe it's best to make arrangements," he began, "in case—" Something in Sam snapped. He grabbed Earl's shirt front, pushing him against the barn wall. "To what?" Sam's voice rose to a roar. "Cast her out? Leave her to die like you all did before?" He shoved him back. "She's mine to protect now. Anyone comes here suggesting otherwise again will answer to me. Clear?" Earl nodded quickly, scrambling back to his wagon. The dust had barely settled when Sam heard Nicole calling weakly from inside. He rushed to her bedside. Her eyes were still glazed with fever, but she seemed to see him. "Water," she whispered. His hands shook as he helped her sip from a cup. Heard, shouting, just telling folks to mind their own business, he said, smoothing her sweat-dampened hair. Don't you worry about anything but getting strong. He sat beside her through another long night. He thought about the preacher's words, about losing his claim. The land had been his life's work. He'd thought having Nicole here would secure it. But somewhere in these past weeks, the land had become secondary. Secondary to the quiet joy of sharing a meal, to the sound of children learning their letters in his front room, to Nicole's gentle presence making his house a home. Dawn crept in on the fourth day. Sam had dozed off in his chair when a soft touch on his arm startled him awake. Nicole's eyes were clear. Her fever was broken. She looked as fragile as spun glass, but she was alive. Sam, her voice was a whisper. How long? 3 days. His own voice cracked. I thought I was losing you. I heard you, she said, praying, talking to me. The emotion he'd been holding back for days overwhelmed him. He slid from his chair to his knees beside her bed, taking her thin hand in his. I thought I needed this place, he said hoarsely. Thought I needed sons to prove something to the railroad. But I was wrong. He pressed his forehead to their joined hands. I need you, Nicole. More than the land, or sons, or anything else. I don't know when it happened, but there it is. Tears slipped down her pale cheeks. I need you too, she whispered. I have since you found me in that storm. Not just for shelter. For you. Sam felt wetness on his own face as years of locked-away feelings broke free. When Sarah died, I thought I'd never let myself care for anyone again. Too risky. Too painful. He lifted his head, his eyes meeting hers. But you slipped past all my walls. You made me remember what it means to have a family. Nicole's free hand touched his cheek. We can be each other's family now. For real, not just for the railroad's sake. He turned his face into her palm, letting himself feel the comfort of her touch. Outside, morning birds began to sing, but inside the cabin, time seemed to stand still as two lonely souls finally found their way home to each other. Spring crept into the highlands like a shy child. The snow gave way to mud and new grass. 2 weeks had passed since Nicole's fever broke. Weakness still lingered, but a new strength was in her bearing. Now, children, she said softly to the row of youngsters seated on the rough benches before her. Can anyone tell me how to spell spring? Little Mary Weber's hand shot up. S-P-R-I-N-G. Very good, Nicole smiled. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, warming her back. Outside, the rhythmic sound of Sam's hammer drifted in as he mended a fence. Every few minutes, his tall frame would pass the window, and his eyes would find hers, checking. Since her illness, his protective instincts had only grown stronger. She understood. She had heard him that night, his gruff voice breaking as he admitted how much she meant to him. The memory was a warmth that never faded. The peaceful lesson was shattered by the thunder of approaching hoofbeats. A well-dressed man on a bay horse appeared in the yard. His smart suit and polished boots marked him as a city man. The leather satchel at his side could only mean one thing. The railroad inspector had arrived. Sam materialized at the cabin door, wiping his hands on his trousers. Afternoon, he called, his voice carefully neutral. The inspector dismounted, examining the homestead with keen eyes. Samuel Crane, I'm Marcus Whitfield, Western Pacific Railroad. Hear about your claim verification. Nicole's throat went dry. This was the moment. Children, she said softly, please continue with your sums. She rose carefully and stepped onto the porch. This is Miss Nicole May, Sam introduced her, his hand finding the small of her back. She keeps our home and teaches the local children. Whitfield's eyebrows rose slightly at her appearance, but his professional manner never wavered. A pleasure, Miss May. I see you run a school here. Yes, sir, 3 days a week. And you manage the household as well. She does, Sam answered for her. Keeps everything running smooth as clockwork. The inspector walked the property methodically, noting the well-maintained barn, the healthy livestock, the neat wood pile. He asked pointed questions. The children's presence proved unexpectedly helpful. As Whitfield examined the cabin, Tommy Baker ran up to Nicole with his slate. Teacher, I did all 20 numbers right. His face beamed with pride. Well done, Tommy, Nicole said, bending to examine his work, aware of the inspector watching their interaction. Teacher helps us every week, Mary Weber piped up from her bench, even when she was sick. Whitfield's pen scratched across his notebook. When he mounted his horse to leave, the sun was low. You'll have my report within the week, he told Sam. But I must say, you've built something quite remarkable here, Mr. Crane. The railroad values stable family settlements. They watched him ride away, Nicole's heart pounding with cautious hope. Sam's arm slipped around her waist, solid and warm. You did well, he murmured. We did well, she corrected softly. Their peace was short-lived. The next morning, Sam rode into town for supplies, returning early with a thunderous expression. What happened? She asked as he strode into the cabin. The preacher, Sam's jaw worked. He's called a town meeting, claiming your presence here will poison the whole depot project. Nicole sank into a chair. What did he say? That no God-fearing town can prosper with a cursed woman in its midst. Says the railroad will abandon the depot plan if they learn about you, that the whole town will suffer. But the inspector seems satisfied. Doesn't matter to them, Sam's fist crashed against the table. The preacher's got them scared. He wants them to petition the railroad, demand they reject my claim. Because of me, Nicole's voice broke. I'm ruining everything for you, just like they said I would. Tears spilled over. All your work, your land. Stop. Sam crossed the room in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms. Don't you say that. But the depot would bring so much to the town. Jobs, growth. She pressed her face into his shirt. How can I let you lose it all because of me? Listen to me. His voice rumbled in his chest against her ear. I lived 15 years on this land alone. Worked it, built it, thought it was everything. Then I found you. You brought life back to this place. You made it a home. He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. The depot don't mean nothing if I lose you. You're my family now, Nicole May, and I don't aim to let anyone change that. Fresh tears fell, but these were different. Tears of belonging, of finally finding her place in the world. Outside, new leaves unfurled on the aspens. Change was coming, ready or not. But wrapped in Sam's strong arms, Nicole knew they would face it together. The mountain night pressed dark against the cabin windows. Nicole stirred the fire while Sam cleaned his rifle. The tension hung thick in the air. The first pounding on the door made them both jump. Crane, get out here! It was the preacher's voice. This ends tonight. Sam rose slowly, rifle in hand. More voices joined the first, an angry murmur swelling outside. Through a gap in the shutters, she glimpsed the flicker of torches. A mob. Stay back from the windows, Sam ordered, barring the door with a heavy beam. The pounding came again, harder. We know she's in there, Crane, another voice called. That cursed girl's got to go, for the good of the town. Nicole pressed herself against the wall, trembling. Sam Crane, the preacher's voice rose above the others. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Send her out, and we'll see she gets somewhere safe. Far from here. Ain't nobody coming in this house uninvited, Sam called back, his voice steady and dangerous. A rock crashed through a window pane, glass tinkling across the floor. Think about what you're risking, the preacher shouted. The depot, civilization itself. Are you willing to sacrifice all that for one cursed girl? Every word was a blow. She was standing in the way of their future, of Sam's future. The weight of it was crushing. Sam, she whispered, stepping forward on shaking legs. Maybe they're right. He turned his head sharply. Don't. I could go, she pressed on, her voice quavering. Find somewhere else. You could keep your land. The town could have its depot. No. The word was a growl. Last chance, Crane, someone yelled. Send her out or we're coming in. She moved closer, touching his arm. Please, I can't be the reason you lose everything. She's my wife. Sam's roar cut through the night like thunder, silencing the mob. Nicole stared at him, her heart stuttering. He had never called her that before. Not like this. Not with a fierce conviction that seemed to shake the very air. You hear me, he roared again. She's my wife, and this is her home. Any man who wants to touch her answers to me. The silence that followed was absolute. Think carefully, Crane, the preacher warned, but his voice had lost its certainty. The Lord? Sam's laugh was harsh. The Lord led her to my door that night. The Lord gave her strength to survive what you all did to her. And if you think he wants you threatening a woman with torches and rocks, you're reading from a different Bible than I am. She watched his words land among the crowd. There was shuffling, muttering. My wife, Sam repeated, softer now, but no less firm. Under my protection, in our home. Any man with a problem can face me in the daylight, one at a time. But tonight, you're going to go home and think about what kind of men throw rocks at a woman who's done nothing but teach your children and tend your sick. The silence stretched, then retreating footsteps. One pair, then another. The torchlights moved away. This isn't over, Crane, the preacher called, but his threat was hollow. Yes, Sam answered quietly. It is. They stood motionless until the last footsteps faded. Nicole sank into a chair, her legs shaking. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. Yes, he said, turning to face her. I did. But calling me your... She couldn't finish. My wife. He pulled up a chair beside her. Reckon it's time I admitted what's been true for a while now. He took her trembling hand. When I found you, I said I needed blonde sons. I was a fool. I thought I needed heirs. It took me too long to see what I really needed was someone who wasn't afraid of me. Someone who could look past what everyone else saw and make this place a home again. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I was afraid tonight, afraid of ruining your life. Nicole, his fingers tightened around hers. Look at me. She raised her eyes to his. You are everything. The land, the depot. None of it matters without you. When you were sick, I realized I can't lose another wife. I won't survive it. A small sound escaped her, half laugh, half sob. Another wife? Are you asking me proper this time? For the first time since she'd met him, Sam smiled. It transformed his face. Reckon I am, though I seem to have announced it to half the town already. She laughed through her tears. Not exactly how I imagined being proposed to. No. His thumb traced circles on her palm. Will you be my wife? In truth? She looked around the cabin, at the clean hearth, the children's corner, the mending basket, everything that had become her home. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. His smile returned. Brighter than before, he lifted her hand to his lips. You know they'll still talk, she said, leaning into his embrace. Let them, his voice rumbled in his chest. Reckon we've proved we're stronger than their talk. I love you, she whispered, saying the words for the first time. Not because you defended me, but because you saw me, when everyone else looked away. He didn't say the words back, not yet, but she felt them in the gentle kiss he pressed to her hair, in the way he held her like something precious. They had weathered their storm, and they had emerged together. Dawn painted the Colorado sky as Sam and Nicole hitched the wagon. It was the day of the railroad's final decision. Nicole clutched Inaba's shawl around her shoulders like armor. The journey into town felt like an eternity. As they approached the meeting hall, she saw the townsfolk gathered, their murmurs filling the air. Inside, the railroad agent sat at a heavy oak table. The room fell silent. Mr. Crane, the agent began, explain why your claim should stand. Sam spoke plainly of his years working the land. Then the agent turned to Nicole. And you, Mrs. Crane, tell us your role here. Nicole took a deep breath. I teach the children their letters. I tend our home. I learn healing from our Ute neighbors. She glanced at Sam. We work the land together, as a family should. To her surprise, Sarah Miller stood up. My boy couldn't read a word before Mrs. Crane taught him. Now he reads from the Bible every night. Others rose one by one. They spoke of her gentle ways, her healing skills, her quiet dignity. The preacher surged to his feet, his face mottled with rage. She's cursed, an abomination that will bring ruin. That's enough, the agent cut him off sharply. I've heard sufficient testimony. He shuffled his papers, then looked up, his gaze sweeping over Sam and Nicole. The board confirms Samuel Crane's land rights. The depot will be built elsewhere. Nicole sagged in relief, tears spilling down her cheeks as the room erupted in applause. Sam's strong hand found hers, squeezing tight. Their home was safe. Their future was secure. Night settled over the town, but the preacher's voice rang out from the church steps, sharp with desperation. Brothers and sisters, can you not see the evil that walks among us? But this time his words fell on deaf ears. Martha Jenkins, the oldest resident in town, stepped forward. Enough, Reverend Thompson, her weathered voice carried across the square. We all remember how you courted Sarah May, Nicole's mother, how bitter you turned when she chose another. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The preacher's face drained of color. You've blamed that child from the day she was born different, Thomas Miller added. Called her cursed because her mama rejected you. The preacher stumbled backward, his righteous facade crumbling. I only sought to protect. You protected nothing but your own wounded pride, Martha cut in. That girl has shown more Christian charity than you ever did. Shame finally broke through his anger. Without another word, the preacher fled, disappearing into the darkness, his poisoned words finally silenced. Under a canopy of stars, Sam and Nicole walked home. The cabin welcomed them with familiar warmth. Sam turned to her, his rough hands gentle as he took hers. You saved more than the land today, he said quietly. You saved me. From loneliness, from bitterness, from becoming like him. Nicole's pale features softened in the dim light. Perhaps, she whispered, God made me this way, not as a curse, but as a lamp, to help others find their way through the darkness, like I found mine. Sam's eyes glistened as he nodded, understanding at last. Her difference was not a flaw. It was a gift, one that had brought light back into his world. The late spring sun bathed the homestead in golden light. Sam and Nicole worked side by side in their new garden, their hands caked with rich soil. Children's laughter filled the air as they helped plant seeds. Anaba arrived with herb seedlings, her dark eyes sparkling with warmth. These will bring healing, she said, kneeling beside Nicole, just as you have brought healing to this place. Nicole looked around at the tended earth, the playing children, Sam's strong presence nearby. This was more than survival. This was truly living. That evening, as they sat at their table, Sam reached for her hands. Nicole May, he began, his voice rough with emotion. When I found you, I offered marriage for land and sons. But that ain't what I want anymore. He squeezed her hands. I want you as my true wife. Not for the railroad, not for children, but because you've brought light back to this home, and to my heart. Tears sparkled in her pale eyes. Sam Crane, she whispered, you saved my life that day. But here, with you, I found so much more than just living. Sam stood, drawing her to her feet. Before the warmth of their hearth, he pulled her close. Their first kiss was tender and true, blessed by the flickering lamplight and the sacred silence of their home. What had begun as a desperate bargain had transformed into something far more precious, a love born of shared struggles, sealed with a promise that went beyond mere words. The railroad tracks gleamed in the distance, a silver ribbon that no longer represented a threat, but a connection to a world that could no longer hurt them. As evening settled, Sam and Nicole sat on the porch steps, shoulders touching, watching the sun sink behind the western peaks. Sam's arm settled around her, strong and secure. Reckon God has his own ways of answering prayers, he murmured, his gaze sweeping over their flourishing homestead, then down at Nicole's bright head resting against his shoulder. I thought I needed blonde sons, and you needed shelter. But he gave us something greater. He gave us each other. Nicole's fingers found his, squeezing gently. Peace filled her heart as she looked out over the land that had become their home. The mountains that had once seemed so harsh now stood like guardians, protecting the precious life they had built. She had found not just shelter, but belonging. Not just survival, but a life abundant. A family born not of blood, but of faith and love. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might just change your day.